the Long Take Review, where 4 college professors talk film, providing insight, not assigning homework. I'm your host, Jen Sobchak-Bankard, and I'm here with a cheap mercenary I hire from time to time. He's protecting you from boring evening. It's Greg Cass. How's it going, Greg?
Jen, I'm so alone. I don't have anything anymore. All I do is sit and look at my phone and think of all the terrible things I've done. And then I go to work, and then I drink, come home to no one. Then I sit and think of all the terrible things I've done again and again. Hi, Jen. I'm good.
I don't think that's true based on what you just said. I can't believe you went for that. That monologue hit. We'll talk about it. Hit close to home, I want to say.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. Okay. So, dear listeners, those were all references to the film we are here to review today, Thunderbolts, which is the latest Marvel film out in theaters now. This is directed by Jake Schreier, I believe is how you pronounce it, who is best known for the Netflix series Beef, though he has made a couple films. Greg, have you seen any of his films?
I have not. No, I haven't even finished Beef, which is bad cred. But look, we do a movie podcast, not a prestige TV podcast. All right? We got to make choices.
That's true. So this superhero film brings a series of lesser-known anti-heroes from the MCU together as an unlikely team, trying to be as vague as possible to avoid spoilers. Oscar nominee Florence Pugh stars as Yelena Belova. She's Black Widow's little sister. I want to presume everyone knows that. And she co-stars alongside Oscar nominee Sebastian Stan as Bucky Barnes, or the Winter Soldier, Wyatt Russell as John Walker, aka U.S. Agent, David Harbour as the Red Guardian, Hannah John Carmen as Ghost, Louis Pullman as Bob, just Bob, and Julia Louis-Dreyfus as Valentina Allegra de Fontaine.
And just to clarify, there is no certainty on whether Louis Pullman is playing the same Bob he played in Top Gun Maverick or a different Bob. It's up to the viewers to decide.
Yeah, tell us in the comments what you think. So I keep seeing news, quote unquote, news articles that apparently Louis Pullman requested initially to be named something other than Bob because he had just played a Bob in Top Gun Maverick. I don't know. I didn't read any of those articles. I just kept seeing headlines about that. And I'm like, why is this news? Anyway, if you are listening to us for the first time, we will have a spoiler-free section designed for those who have not yet seen the film. And with a very clear alert, we will shift into spoiler mode for the rest of the show. Although I have to say, have you seen, Greg, that apparently the Marvel doesn't actually care about spoiling the movie for people? Did you see these ads today?
No, but I mean, that's the game now, is they don't care after opening weekend, right? Spoiler, I saw this movie early and they were very clear on like what could not be spoiled, what you couldn't say. And it all expired, the day of opening day. Cause they're like, we just want to spread it around and make people have to see it. So, but yeah,
I will be vague, but there were a bunch of promotional videos with the cast and stuff I saw on the internet today where they were ripping away the Thunderbolts title on the movie poster and revealing what the reveal of the movie is.
Oh man, that's a big one. That's a big
one. Crazy?
I mean, we'll save it. We'll save it for now.
So like, maybe it's a farce for us to pretend that we're not going to talk about spoilers because people have probably listening to this probably have seen them already. But Greg, I'm getting ahead of us. If listeners want to join us for another mission after listening to this episode, what can they do?
Well, Jen, if listeners want to be the heroes on the Wheaties box and not miss any new episodes when they drop, then they should follow the Long Take Review wherever they get their fine podcasts. I'm not going to name all the services, but you know what you're listening to podcasts on right now. Find us there, follow us there, leave reviews for us there. That includes many, many platforms that you visit all the time, so take care of it. And then you can also follow the podcast on Instagram and Threads at the Long Take Review and on Letterboxd at LTR Pod. Those accounts are managed by PT, who's absent, so go ahead and drop a comment or two or DM that account and just say some mean things to him and how he should still believe in Marvel. Back to you, Jen.
Thanks, Greg, and well played. PT has not seen this movie yet. I talked to him yesterday, so he is not here, and that's largely by choice. He could have probably made it happen if he really wanted to by now. Anyway, let's start, as we normally do, with the short take. Greg, what was your general reaction to Thunderbolts? How'd you like it?
Marvel's back, baby. Pew, pew, pew. Right? I mean, I think the internet has taken that as its shared narrative at this point. Sorry, I just watched the sound wave max out when I bound. So, and now my light died. I don't want to be too superlative, but I think it's been a rough few years for Marvel. And one of the things that defines the wobble, as Joanna Robinson termed it in her MCU book, is that it's very inconsistent and often doesn't know what it's doing or tries to be too ambitious. And I would say that this is a kind of classic small Marvel movie. It doesn't try to be something like Avengers or Captain America Civil War or even Captain America Brave New World. It just says, hey, we've got this cast of characters. We've got these phenomenal actors, as you just noted, award-winning or award-nominated actors. Let's just let them cook. And I thought this movie was great. It was, to me, more in line with something like Daredevil than something like the Avengers in a lot of ways. Though that isn't a perfect analogy. And I don't expect it will win anybody over who's angrily thrown down their Captain America mask and stomped out over Hulk action figures away from the franchise. But I think if you've stuck with it, you're going to be like, I actually really like this. And I really like these characters and they know what they're doing again. So definitely positive for me. And my son and I both enjoyed it, thought it was fantastic. So it worked. I think that's sometimes a concern when it's not the kind of big, flashy superheroes. Like, would a kid enjoy it? But he loved it, except for one thing I will bring up in spoilers. So, Jen, what did you think about Thunderbolts?
I really, really enjoyed this movie. I had a ton of fun watching it, and it is like a breath of fresh air. So I want to kind of be the one to manage listeners' expectations. If you haven't seen this movie yet, let's just be clear. It's not necessarily like mind-blowing all-timer compared to all other Marvel movies. But I think if you just slice out the sort of post-Endgame period of Marvel movies, this is probably towards the top, if not at the top. And I think it's a little controversial whether people count Spider-Man No Way Home in the other phase versus this phase, or this saga. I don't count it. I kind of group that in with like it's with Endgame and those movies. Like in terms of Marvel lately, this is definitely is going to pleasantly surprise you, most likely. But I don't want to like my concern now is that, it's barely been a week since this movie came out, and even critics are like, yeah, this is good. We're back, right? Like you're saying, that is the dominant narrative. My worry is that, in a week or two down the line, people are going to go see this and be like, I mean, that was okay. That was good. But like, what are we talking about? Like, I don't want there to be like a skewing of expectations. So that's why I'm here to be like, it's not like, the best Marvel film ever made, but it is a very good one. It's very fun. And I would say the thing that's working in its favor for me, at least, is it's very focused. Like it was like, we're going to do this one thing. And it's not like completely isolated and self-contained. We'll talk about it in spoiler mode from the rest of the MCU. It has quite a few connections to kind of current MCU storytelling, but in the terms of the movie itself and the story the movie is trying to tell, it's focused. It seems confident in its tone. I'd say it's one limitation is it sets up kind of an interesting theme, but then because it's still an action superhero movie, it can't necessarily go as far as another movie could have, maybe with that theme. Again, I'm being vague, but we'll talk about it in spoiler mode. So that's my only like one kind of like, if I'm putting my own asterisk on this movie, that would be the one thing to be like, oh, like it raised something pretty interesting and then was kind of like hit a wall in terms of what it could do with it. But that said, acting was great. I was laughing the entire time. I thought the jokes were on point. Choreography was great. Like it was kind of firing on all cylinders.
I want to take your point and just add part of why I think it feels so focused is it's actually a very short amount of time in universe, right? I think it's 48 hours or
Right.
so. It's really brief, and I found myself, I've now seen it twice, and when I was in my second viewing, I was like, oh, we're already like hours in universe from the final scene, and it works, and I think it does have a kind of could this destroy the world threat, but it doesn't quite feel that big or that grand. It kind of is nice that the finale has some CG, but is not like an army invading or some like huge array of monsters. It's kind of all small, and you just punch and shoot, and that's it.
I'm glad that they took the time to kind of set up a premise for a movie that was focused on that.
Yeah.
Because I think people are asking for that all the time. They're like, where's our street level Marvel? We kind of just talked up the fact that this is kind of a good standalone movie and isn't kind of using everything else around it as a crutch in terms of the MCU canon. But that said, do you feel like, and we're going to get into the recommendation algorithm, in which we establish the audience of a film. I should have prefaced that before I started making this point. That's okay. But like, what is there Marvel homework that's useful? Like, if someone is interested in watching something before this, what would you recommend?
I think the most important piece of Marvel homework would be the film Black Widow. And I'm stealing this point. I believe it was from Mallory Rubin on Big Picture, who pointed out that the Black Widow movie is actually very good. The problem is when it came out. If it had come out before Endgame and Infinity War, then it would have felt right. But because it came after and we were all like, what's going on? What's going to happen? And it had this problem where Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow had been killed off already. It just felt like an afterthought. But I would point people to that movie because it is a pretty good one. When you were saying like post Endgame, what's at the top of that list? That's pretty high for me as well. Maybe Shang-Chi is up there too, though that is not relevant at all to this movie. But maybe it'll happen. Did he get a chair? I don't think he got a chair, or did he get a chair?
I think he did.
Oh, okay.
I think people had the Arrested Development her kind of moment with that. They were like, really? Like, because you're right. Like, that movie seems the least relevant.
Yeah.
Based on movies that came after. So, like, we're still waiting on why we care about the 10 Rings in terms of like, wider Marvel canon.
Because it seemed like it kind of connects into Ms. Marvel's bracelets. Well, we're going full galaxy brain here. But so I actually already had the recommendation algorithm thrown in my face when dear co-host Antonio asked out of the blue, should I go see Warfare or Thunderbolts? And my friends, if you haven't seen these movies, you cannot imagine two more different movies. And should I order Chinese food or just like chew on gravel? No, they're both good. They're both good quality. I didn't mean it like that. I just meant two very different things.
Greg, chewing on gravel is not good.
Well,
you got to revise your metaphor.
Hobbies. So he threw that question at me with all the love and admiration he always includes. And it was a really hard question. And I found myself kind of asking the question of like, is Thunderbolts good enough to kind of transcend Marvel in some way? And my answer was ultimately no, right? Like, I think this is a solid Marvel movie, but, I don't think Antonio, who is our, highest connoisseur of quiet, dramatic awards fair, is going to be like, yeah, Thunderbolts ruled. So it was a little tricky to answer the question. So I will say, I think if you're into Marvel, I think if you really, really love these actors, they do sparkle, they do shine quite a bit. So I think those would be the reasons to give this a try. And if you want to do the homework, fine. If you don't, you're not going to know who Ghost is, but like we did the homework and we still aren't entirely sure who Ghost is and some of those other characters. So I say, if you love the actors, go for it on its own, but don't worry too much about the homework. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd say the homework's like recommended reading, not required reading for sure. I would add that Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the Disney Plus show, is actually pretty important. And we have already recommended that. I feel like when that came out on Disney Plus, none of us realized how important the story would be, what that was setting up would be for the future. But between Brave New World and this, I would say, if you're looking to catch up on Marvel and kind of provide some story context, I think that's the other important one. And because I think Black Widow gets you Florence Pugh and David Harbour's characters, and you have more context for the. And again, it's not necessary because I think the film does actually a really good job of building the context that you need to understand their relationship in the movie. But if you want to deepen that, I think go watch Black Widow. And then the other one is Bucky
US
Barnes and U.S.
Yep.
Agent. Yeah, U.S. Agent is the big one because he does not appear in anything else.
Right.
He was introduced in Falcon the Winter Soldier, and then that's it. So I think understanding his backstory and baggage that he brings to this movie as a character, I think that's So there's lots of reason to watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier, a Disney Plus show that was not actually that popular.
Well, and I have fond memories of that one, but I think the prevailing wisdom is that it went off the rails at the end, and I think it had a little trouble sticking its falcony landing. But there are elements in that show that were so well done, and just letting Anthony Mackie and Sebastian Stan play off each other, you kind of miss that. There's a little of that here at times. You see that side of Bucky, but nobody had better chemistry than those two. Which I think was part of the problem because they were leaving Chris Evans out in the cold, just those two.
The other recommendation I would make, and this is more a touchstone for like, if you like this flavor of Marvel, you will like this movie. I would say Guardians of the Galaxy. If you're a Guardians of the Galaxy fan, the team up energy in this movie, very similar in terms of like their ragtag, their bickering. It seems impossible that they would be able to get along and work as a team. And then, then things progress from there. So I think that's if this group is sticking around for a while, I would say that's the spot that they're going to hold in the MCU, is because I think we're not necessarily going to get more Guardians of the Galaxy as we knew it.
I mean, just recently, Chris Pratt pointed out that Guardians 3 ends with Star-Lord will return. So he's still in play, but not it was, is what you said, and that's accurate.
James Gunn will not return, right? Unless Superman bombs and then he gets
fired.
Did
you say when? You said when?
Oh,
sorry.
Greg, have a little optimism. I mean, I'm also skeptical. You can listen to our hype draft episode where, spoiler, nobody drafted Superman. All right. So, yeah, I think that gives enough recommendation. I think if you're at all still in on Marvel, definitely go see this.
Yeah.
All right. We're ready for spoiler mode, Greg?
I've been ready my whole life.
Amazing. So if you have not seen Thunderbolts * and you do not want it spoiled, it's a miracle, because if you've spent any time on the internet like I have today, a bunch of it is spoiled for you, which I guess we'll talk about in a second. But if you want to wait to hear our conversation that is full of spoilers, go see the movie. It's in theaters now. Come back and rejoin us for the rest of the conversation. Okay, so I wasn't actually planning on starting this, but because I've teased this like, oh, they're spoiling their own movie thing so much already during this episode, I have to just say it. So the asterisk after Thunderbolts, there was a lot of speculation before the movie. Now they're the new Avengers. So there's a video of the cast. There's Florence Pugh with her perfectly manicured nails delicately peeling away part of the movie poster, and they take away Thunderbolts, and then underneath it says New Avengers. What did you think about that reveal, Greg?
I thought it was awesome. I think it's important people know that New Avengers are an established comic book team, and they've had many iterations, none of which I think exactly match this one, but in that kind of, well, it's actually kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy, right? The film Guardians of the Galaxy team was not established previously as that exact lineup. And I thought this was fantastic and starts to answer the question, this plus the post-credit scene, which we shouldn't just talk immediately about the post-credit scene, but that's where this comes up. Or no, it comes up before the credits, but it establishes a little bit of where this is going, that we're going to have rival Avengers teams that are then faced with an interdimensional threat. And that interdimensional threat was clarified at the end, or was hinted at the end of Brave New World, and is here. And we now know we have lots of heroes sprinkled between two dimensions, and those dimensions are coming together, and it's going to be crazy and wild. But the audience I was with went absolutely nuts for this reveal, and were hooting and hollering in a way I haven't heard at one of these in a really long time. So I think it's going to win a lot of people over, and it's great. I mean, I will defer to you with the question, like, do you think people guessed this was coming? Did they know this was coming? I feel like I saw a little speculation, but I thought it was a big surprise, at least for me, to see it come together. What did you think?
Yeah, I think the actual name itself was a surprise, but I think before seeing the movie, if I had to guess what the asterisk was designating, it would have been some like renaming of the team, right, to be more meaningful. I think I can't remember. It was a Ringerverse podcast or a Ringer podcast, maybe Ringerverse, maybe House of R, maybe even Big Picture. I can't remember. But there was a lot of talk of whether or not these would be the Dark Avengers, right? Because they're kind of like the anti-hero team, right? But turns out no. Turns out it's New Avengers. Yeah. And I do think that like it's unclear the extent to which this is a joke, to me at least, and how much they are actually going to be New Avengers versus we're just saying that for now. And then once Sam Wilson comes back after his lawsuit, apparently, over the copyright of the word Avengers, you know what I mean? Like that was kind of my thing. I'm like, oh, what a fun idea. But I feel like it's actually more fun if we follow through on it in some meaningful way where they actually could be. They're not just like the Avengers with a Z, right? We're really going into these end credit scenes. As funny as I thought that was, like that's how we get around the copyright infringement is by using a Z instead of an S.
Yeah.
But I also think that there's just, to speak to what you're talking about with your audience's reaction, mine was the same. People were pretty excited about this. And I think there's actually like a pretty substantial meta narrative in the film. Like there's somebody, when they're doing that montage of like people's reactions after like, oh, the Avengers are gone at the beginning. I can't remember when that happens, but someone says, the Avengers formed when I was in high school. It's so weird that this is all over.
That's Valentina's assistant.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll skip all the way back to the start of the movie for the other spoiler I hinted at, which is, so we had reserved seats at this cool screening. We were sitting there waiting for the movie to start, and they just had a title card up that was a picture of all the Thunderbolts. And so my son and I are just waiting and eating our popcorn, and I was like, okay, which ones are you excited about? And he looked at the poster, he kind of worked through, and he said, who's that one at the bottom again on the right side? And I was like, oh, that's Taskmaster. He's like, that's the one I'm most excited about, because we barely got to see them in Black Widow. Like, I really want to see what their powers are. And so for those who skipped here without seeing it or who need a reminder, Taskmaster is in this movie for all of a minute, maybe. And I actually give Marvel marketing a lot of credit on this, that they put that hero alongside the rest. And, in this big opening fight between all of the Thunderbolts, just catches a bullet straight to the head and dies. And we learn nothing more about Taskmaster. We don't know what Taskmaster has been doing since the events of Black Widow, other than seemingly working for Valentina. So he was a little bummed about that, but still was really positive on the movie. It was just really funny that he said out of nowhere, Taskmaster is my favorite. Like, I can't wait. And then nope.
That's really funny. Yeah. I wonder, because I remember people being so mad that at how Taskmaster was portrayed in Black Widow, right? That's the main. Okay. I feel like I'm like, was there a Disney Plus show where she showed up too? I can't remember now. I think it's just Black Widow. I remember there was a lot of discourse about that at the time, of people being like, oh, like this is just such a great character and they ruined it, blah, blah, blah. Some of that for toxic misogynistic reasons, others for comic canon legitimate reasons. Like, it seemed like a mixed bag.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And it does feel like they were just like, and she's gone. Like, let's not deal with this problem anymore. So yeah, I'm sorry for That was the one character that he picked. That's funny. Um, okay. So in our short takes, we kind of talked about how this is a breath of fresh air. We're back, kind of like return to form almost Marvel movie based on kind of what we've been getting. But in general, how do you feel like this compares to other Marvel films? And you can take that in whatever direction you want. But like, how different or offbeat is this actually as a Marvel movie? Do you think?
It's a good question. So I think the people who, especially in the weeks leading up to this, were very skeptical. Were like, who are these people? Who cares, right? And I think there's going to be some of that always now that we're kind of out of the main heroes. Now, for the record, I remember a lot of that before Iron Man, right? Like in the rose-colored glasses looking back from Endgame, people are always like, "Oh, Iron Man was always my favorite." It's like, no, he wasn't. He wasn't anybody's favorite. Nobody had heard of him until that first movie. I hear you, comic book nerds. I'm one of you. Yes, I know you'd heard of him, but the whole kind of Marvel MCU project kind of came about because they'd already sold off the rights to the good characters and they took this kind of B squad. And so if that's the case, we're now on the like F squad or something like that. But I think it was a fresh breath of fresh air because these were all essentially human. I mean, we see a little super strength. We see one giant John Walker leap, which is then never replicated again. It's a very odd, I mean, it's a good bit, but it's a very odd, like, power breaking moment. And so I think the freshness of it is kind of focusing on normal, broken people and just kind of embracing how normal and broken they are and letting the audience feel a little of that. You also noted, I think rightfully, this film is playing with the fact that these characters are literally in the shadow of the Avengers, right? Like they go to the same places, they're in the shadow of the tower. They built that same street outside Grand Central Station, I'm sure in Georgia again, outside Atlanta somewhere. And they make it that, and then the threat becomes themselves just turning literally into a shadow, right? And so in all those ways, they're really kind of, I think, having a kind of wry joke about the fact that Marvel is a shadow of what it once was or seems to be. And I think that's kind of Feige's magic, right? That he can kind of take the piss out of himself and the project in ways that are meaningful and yet kind of do something for it. So all of that worked really well. I would also, I swear I'm answering your question. The other thing I'd put in that category, and maybe you want to take off on this, is this movie just looked good. And that was fresh and refreshing. We joked in Captain America Brave New World, spoilers, that there was no real set like ever. I think Harrison Ford was never somewhere real. I'm not even sure he was in the volume. I think he was just in front of a green screen a lot of time. There were no real cherry trees. There were no real, like, you could just see they were floating in space and the actors suffered for that. It is shocking if you watch some of the behind the scenes stuff, how much of this film was just real and they just did it outright. So did you appreciate its look and feel? Do you think that added to its freshness?
Yeah, I would agree. And I definitely think there's kind of a grittiness to it as well, but actually for me it's less about the visuals and more about the character development, like, or the focus on character, because I feel like there isn't a single person in this movie whose motivations we don't understand and whose like the stakes of for whom we don't, you know what I mean? Like the stakes are clear for each character in terms of like what are they trying to overcome, or kind of what's going to hold them back and all that sort of stuff. And I thought that exposition was handled. This is something we also critiqued with Brave New World. The exposition in that movie feels like a dump, right? It's just like, blah, blah, here you go. But
that's
in this
dump in
movie,
both senses of the word audience.
sorry, I didn't necessarily mean it that way, but sure. I was thinking of it. I always use the word info dump as a student paper thing of like, don't just give me a paragraph that could have easily come from Wikipedia. Like, tell me something about it. Use that information and shape it. But here, that's what it's doing. It's using the exposition as a storytelling point, right? Like it's, and to build relationships between the characters, right? There's one of my favorite moments is when they're climbing up they're back to back, and they're climbing up, shimmying up
Mm.
it's like an elevator shaft, I think, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And they're kind of like almost making, like you said, poking fun at their own archetype. They're like, well, I'm a childhood assassin over here. You're not gonna be able to beat me. Like, it was really funny, but it was a way of communicating things about the characters without breaking away from what's happening in the moment. You know what I mean? Like, it was
Yeah.
them doing that was them arguing over what to do next or something like that, right? Like, it was all together in the same forward momentum. And I just thought that worked really well. It's amazing how much a good screenplay that kind of is attentive to those sorts of details can really make or break one of these movies. It's uncanny, like how important that is. But it's also doing the thing of like they're joking a ton, and they're making fun of each other, right? They're cracking jokes. They're being so irreverent, especially Elena, where she's like, "Who cares?" Right? Like all the time, constantly, like, "I don't care," right? And yet the emotional beats are still there, right? Like when they
Yeah.
have to flip the switch, like when she has that scene with a Red Guardian, her dad, right? Which you is the one that you cited in your opening.
Yeah.
It hits hard, right? It's like it's genuinely emotional, and part of that's because Florence Pugh is an amazing actress. But part of that's because it's well written and it's earned. Like we've built up to that moment because she's made so many references to like her own depression and the void and how she feels and like how she's not satisfied with her life and all that kind of stuff through, and especially talking to Bob, right? Like it all kind of comes to roost in that one scene. And I'm gonna say the same thing I said with Sinners. It can be done like we for a long time. Like when you watch enough, like, and you can know this better than me, when you watch enough movies that don't do those things, it
Hmm.
becomes hard to believe that it's possible. Like, how hard is it? But it is possible. This movie's doing it.
Well, you also just remind me, like, this starts with I wouldn't even call it a joke, but like you're meant to think she's committing suicide as this movie opens, and then she's wearing a parachute and she's just going through the motions of her job. But like it hits that dark note early and sticks with it, and I think there's a version of this movie that is afraid to be so serious, and that's what I took from your point, is that we get that good character development because we're not afraid to be serious at times. And there's oftentimes movie executives who come in and say, oh, you can't say the word cancer in a comedy because nobody laughs for 5 minutes after that. And it's like, there's no cancer in this movie, but it's like that same idea that we can't have these dark themes in our happy-go-lucky comic movie. But I agree with you. I laughed a lot, and sometimes in a dark way. The child assassin joke. My favorite joke like that was Bucky when he shows up at the end, where they've all traveled through their psyche, and she's like, "What'd you guys see?" And he's like, "Well, I've had a really happy life, so it was all sunshine and roses for me," or something along those lines.
Yeah, I think he said, "I've had a totally chill past, so I
Yeah,
had no
yeah.
problem." So good.
It's so good, and it's I see later in our outline we might pick some favorites and such, but I will note one of the things that's crazy is the way Sebastian Stan has become such a gift to Marvel. And I know this award season was defined by me singing the praises of Sebastian Stan, and like he earned it and is like legit great in every moment he gets. By far the highlight of Brave New World is the scene where he comes back and talks to Anthony Mackie's character. And here he's like so good in every moment. It's like, wow, like how did this guy go from like, oh, Captain America's kind of goofy friend to like a real character of depth and nuance and just fun to watch on screen. And I think, it reminds me of the Harry Potter franchise, how you're like, these kids are terrible. And then by the end, you're like, oh, these kids are actually pretty great. Like they found their way to it. And it's kind of like that, just when you spend this much time in a character. I mean, he must be among the longest to serve in one of these Marvel roles, I would imagine.
That's a good point, because he's really never taken a break of any kind. You know what I mean? Like he's just always been around.
Yeah.
So that's a good question. What would have been I mean, it would have Captain America: The First Avenger would have technically, or no, he's in the first Avengers movie, isn't he? Wait a minute.
Bucky. Bucky
No,
is in
never mind.
Captain America 1 is the first one. So that
The first Avenger.
predates the first Avengers, but he's not around until the second Avengers movie, I think.
Okay. Right, but
I
that's
think he
a
has a
long time.
very small role in the second Avengers, Age of Ultron, and then is back because it's almost like he's stuck in the Captain America franchise and he doesn't really come over for a little while, and then
Right.
he's in the full mix by Civil War.
Right. Yeah, Civil War is where he makes his big crossover debut, I remember.
Yep.
Yeah, that's crazy. And to your point, I do think that part of the reason we're reaping the benefits of both his acting and his character now is because we've just had time, right? Like, I think I may have listened to the same Big Picture podcast as you had. I think it was there that they talked about how he's the only one we don't see flashbacks or go into. We don't see his shame rooms because we don't need to, because we've seen them in the other movies. And so that's a really good use of the sort of like building up story credits kind of with the audience, right? And using that to your advantage.
Well, and just in case we only never come back to Bucky, the moment where he arrives in the car chase and takes out, like, that's just incredibly well done action. And it's like something straight out of a Terminator movie or something like that. And it is so well done. And you're like, yes, this is what this franchise, this saga can be if we like really take our time. And I understand the Marvel process is often to plan out the action set pieces very early and then make the script fit to them. I don't have any proof that this was not that, but it just felt like this really put story front and center and fit everything to story and what it wanted to tell. And that just worked so well. So
I was also going to bring up that scene if you didn't, because his entrance is just so cool. Like, there's no other way to describe it. Like, the way that and part of that's the stunt work and the choreography, right? Like, the way that the motorcycle just like does a 180 into the air and like he flips and then he's dragging the truck and like it's just crazy. But the thing that makes Bucky so charming as a character, and especially in this movie, with not too much effort, is because the screenplay includes, like, you have the crazy cool scene where he makes the dramatic entrance where you're like, whoa, now we're in the big leagues. Like, like the professional is here, right? That's kind of the feeling that you get when he arrives on the scene. And it's also kind of a return to form, like a return to his roots kind of as a character, because like this is less strong, I think, because I still don't know why he's a congressman. Like, how did that happen? Right? Like that happened off screen somewhere. No one's seen it. But you get the sense in this movie that he's been struggling with that, right? Like that he's like, he is as disenfranchised, dissatisfied, maybe depressed with what he's doing as like Yelena might be. But then they pair that cool scene with him like spilling chili on his shirt, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
like he's human, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like he's not all cool, superhero. He's like flawed person who doesn't know what he's doing and spills things on his shirt.
Yeah. Well, and there's also the joke with the assistant when she's like, "Yeah, the Avengers got together when I was in high school," and he was like, "Oh, I was like 90."
Right.
And it's like you forget all those details, but this movie respects you enough to kind of play with those and have fun. Yeah, that entrance, I just want to say that's pure movie star material, right? Like, not anybody could pull that off, and I think a smart director would scoop up Sebastian Stan for like his own Mission Impossible type franchise, because I think he could do it all, and he's got that level of charisma for it. So,
to quote Deadpool and Wolverine, he's going to be Bucky Barnes till he's 90.
I mean, and like if they give him material like this, then I can see him hanging out, complain? Right? Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. The other thing too is like he's actually a good leader in this movie, because I'm thinking of the scene where they're all sitting around and they're like, there's this guy named Bob, like they're trying to explain everything they've experienced in the movie up until this point. It just sounds so weird that he's like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And they're like, no. And then once he understands, because doesn't he get a phone call or something? But then Florence Pugh has this line where she's like, "It's really bad, Bucky."
Yeah.
And I'm just like, there's just so much humanity in that moment, because the way he looks at her back is like, oh, like now I understand that you really care, right? Like, so, And he listens to them. Like, that's the thing, is like, not going to name names. Other Avengers, other classic Avengers may not have listened to them.
Yeah. Well, and in that moment, like, I completely agree with the way you just characterized that. We have no idea how those characters know each other, right? Like, have they met before? Like, Bucky's not even really attached to Natasha, so that's more Hawkeye, right? Like, if it was Hawkeye, it would make a lot of sense. But it's not like I questioned that. I was like, yeah, and I think it is. Despite now being a congressman, Bucky went through the stuff too, right? Like, he was brainwashed and was the Winter Soldier and didn't have control. So he understands who these characters are really deeply and is interested in, like, getting them their redemption too. That scene, I'm going to headcanon right now, that has to be the garage from Asteroid City. Right, like, it looks exactly the same the way
it
it's set
does.
up. I'm like, I think they just stopped by Asteroid City, but
I'm not going to be able to unsee that. That's great. So a second ago, I mentioned that, like, even Bucky is not immune to depression and these, like, dark thoughts, right? And I think that's what makes him connect with this group so well and kind of slide in as the elder statesman, right? And I feel like that was the thing that was really maybe astounding is not the right word, but, like, took me back. Like, I was taken aback by it, where I'm like, is this really a superhero movie that is talking about what it's like to be depressed? Like, this is crazy. And I think and this is going to get us into our next section, in case Greg's on the edge of his seat. Like, where is this going? But to me, I really wished it had pushed it further.
Mm.
And part of it was, I don't know if you ever ended up seeing the A24 style trailer. Okay.
It could have gone a little further into the independent movie kind of ethos in some way, I imagine, right?
That trailer got me excited, but also kind of teased what this movie could never be in a way that I think doesn't serve it well. And again, I'm going to out PT. We were talking yesterday. He was like, that trailer didn't look good. I'm like, what are you talking about? It was great. He's like, it didn't tell you about anything that happened in the movie. I should let him defend himself, I guess. But
no, he doesn't deserve it. He can see a Marvel movie and then he can come defend himself. Well, I will say, as counterpoint, listener to the show, good friend of mine, Ben, actually wasn't planning to see Thunderbolts and then saw that trailer and was like, I want to see that now. Like, I think his exact words to me were like, why am I just now seeing the first good trailer for this movie? Now, I thought all the trailers for this movie were great. I loved the music cues. I mean, listen, this is a podcast that is very pro Diane Warren, writer of the song that features in the second trailer and in the first post-credit scene. Totally forgot until the credits were. I was waiting for the second post-credit scene when I saw Diane Warren's name pass. I was like, of course, of course. That just is totally in her bag. Like,
checks, Diane.
And so I liked all the marketing, but I do think this is the closest we'll ever get to, like, a truly kind of independent movie style, right? And this, I think that's okay, right? And I think pushing the limits of what a comic book movie can do is important. And I would argue that all of our favorite MCU movies, if we were to list our top 5, are probably ones that push in some way to do that. And this, I don't think we've ever seen exactly this one. Now, I think again about, well, a fun litmus test is which Marvel movies get Happy Meal toys. So we don't have Thunderbolts Happy Meal toys this year or any previous year. But Captain America did, right? And so I think they know they're always kind of balancing out the audiences on these. And so it's good that there were no Happy Meal toys to drive kids to it. And I think they knew that tonally this was going to be on the more serious edge of this. But you know what else does that? Comic books, right? All the time. There are, an arc of a trade paperback of one superhero is just totally different in tone, and maybe it bounces back to something friendlier. And that's okay. That's great. So, yeah. I appreciate your point, though, that it could have gone a little bit further, even though there were some pretty dark moments in this.
There were. And I don't mean further in terms of darker. I mean further in terms of, because I feel like we end the movie, and part of this is just function of the plot, right? Like the fact that the villain or antagonist becomes so clearly the metaphor, just literalized and visualized. You know what I mean? Like that, then it becomes about defeating it, right? And not necessarily about thinking about, well, what do we do when we feel like we're alone? And what do we do? I think Hasib has a great Letterboxd review of this where he says essentially like a hug can't solve all of your problems. He doesn't say it as sarcastically that he's being sincere, where he's like, but I still liked it, right? Like it's still a place to start because you don't feel as alone. So there's something to the group hug at the end, but I think the fact that then the movie ends pretty shortly after that, it's like, okay, but like what? So maybe you can enlighten me. Like, so I want to do thesis, please.
Thesis, please.
To kind of ask, like, is this film actually saying anything meaningful about mental health? Or is it the mental health just kind of a device for character development and story or plot? Which would be okay, because I think this is a Marvel movie that the agenda is not necessarily to kind of have a thesis about something really profound, though it'd be nice. But so what do you think? What is this movie actually trying to say something about the void? Or is the void just a device?
First, shout out to our boy Partagast from Andor, back just killing it, and says thesis please for people that don't know. That's a character from Andor. So what I'm struggling to articulate, here's what comes to mind. And if this is a long pop culture reference, then I'm on brand, but also editable. So right as the pandemic started in those kind of early months when we were all like, what is life anymore? The cast of Parks and Rec and Mike Schur in particular, the writer and show creator, got a chunk of money, and they put out a new episode of Parks and Rec. And it was one of my favorite early moments in the pandemic, because the theme of that essentially became like, we're all going to be okay, but we need to take care of each other. And that's like a pure Pawnee Leslie Knope message. And the spoilers for that episode of Parks and Rec, the theme was like, everybody seemed like they were in trouble, but then Leslie trying to fix everybody's problems made her the one in the most trouble, because she was trying to take on everybody else's burden. And so that comes to mind because I feel like this is like the first post-pandemic kind of Marvel movie that really tries to get at the fact that our universe changed dramatically right after the Marvel universe changed dramatically, right? So Marvel tried to do the kind of what happened with the blip, we're all depressed. And so the bad version of this, I would say, is the first hour of Endgame. And that's what you just kind of alluded to, where you're like, oh, it's just a plot device, right? Like, we need one of the Russo brothers to come and say he cried on a date so that we all like care about the fact that nobody can watch the Mets anymore, right? It's all just a little weak. I love the peanut butter and jelly scene as well. Like, it's great. Sorry, Mallory Rubin, but I do think that was just plot device. Whereas here, I think they really wanted to say something. And I read a lot of student papers. I teach a class on research writing that I ask them to come up with their own project. And every single class, probably 3 or 4 students, pick mental health in college students, because they know and they can sense that something is deeply wrong in this generation and it hasn't gotten fixed yet. And increasingly, it looks like nobody cares, right? And I don't say that about my campus lightly. I think it's more culturally, right? It just feels like we're now in a place where the larger society is the Yelena from the start of the movie. They're saying, push it down. We don't have time for this. You don't get to cry. What did World War II's generation do? They put some dirt on it and they stood back up and they got back to it. And I think this film really wants to be very clear that ethos is wrong. And putting the coolest Marvel heroes, not the ones on the most t-shirts, but some of the coolest ones, the people you want to kind of be like, into that message and telling people like, yeah, a hug's not going to fix it, but just share your burden, right? And Sentry, which we haven't said yet, Sentry in the Void is the perfect foil for that. So I had another friend be like, I don't know if I want to see Thunderbolts. Like, who's the villain? Tell me who the villain is. I was like, I can't do that because like it will ruin it for everybody around. Like it's just this complicated thing. But I think Sentry becomes the perfect symbol of this because of the nature of that character. And I'm not the biggest expert on Sentry canon, but it is about, you know, being bipolar, about being a great hero, but also sometimes feeling like crap and letting that darkness take you over. And I think that can be the end of my rant, but I do think there's something meaningful in just telling people it's not your job to figure this all out yourself. Let's all team up. Let's share each other's burden. I love the Alexi language about like your light is brighter. Just the little bit of contact with somebody else makes your light brighter. And I think modern myth should do more to tell us to get out of our phones and stop being so dang isolated and talk to each other. And I think that's what this film is trying to do. What do you think? Is that just too Pollyannish of me? I'm just like,
no,
come on.
I like
what do
it.
you think?
I like it. It's just optimistic, right? Like and positive and understanding and compassionate, right? Which I think is all things that we need, right? So what I remember or think back to as you're talking is in the early scenes where they're kind of like still fighting each other, or they're not sure if they're going to, like, it actually takes a long time for them to trust each other enough to actually work together, right? Because there's a couple of moments in that first act where, like, for example, like Ghost phases through the door. Presumably she's supposed to go get help and come back, or like she's supposed to go do something and come back. And they're like, she probably is not coming back, right? Like their assumption is to not trust her and to be like, we're going to assume everyone's looking out for themselves because that's how we've lived all this time. That's the nature of our profession, right? We're loner mercenaries. We go on our missions by ourselves. We do these things. That's part of Yelena's problem is she's like, I can't do this anymore. Like I can't just be on my own and do these terrible acts and then go home to an empty house, right? And not have to have any actual genuine human contact with people that doesn't involve murdering them. And so I think that's a big component, is that's what the characters all learn over time, is that you have to kind of take a leap of faith and trust other people and kind of like make yourself vulnerable and not just operate from the assumption that everyone is acting out of self-interest. Because then you can only then can you in turn also act selflessly, right? Like if you are kind of trusting the other person to not screw you over, which takes them a long time to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, and what comes to mind with that is it's them in the elevator shaft, right? It's like this huge trust fall exercise within that. But I think you're absolutely right that part of why there's a mental health stigma is that lack of trust. We think people are going to betray us and tell our secrets to other people, right? I mean, down to like, especially why dudes don't get therapy, right? Because we can't seem weak. And what if the therapist tells all my secrets to somebody? And, sorry, I'm just going to scratch myself for 10 minutes instead of continuing the point. But is that what men do? I'm told that's what men, what's that? No? Okay. So I think you're exactly right. And that trust issue. Now I want to pick up on your other piece of this too. So did it all become too literal? Because I just defended the Void Sentry duality. I mean, it's down to like when he has blonde hair and when he has dark hair. Like it's kind of that surface level and simplistic. And I have not really consumed a lot on this movie yet because I try not to until we record. But do you think that's going to turn people off, that the metaphor and theme are just all so surface level and obvious?
I did think of that article that, shout out to my friend Vlad, sent me during the Oscar season, and then I sent to all of you on our group chat about the new literalism. And that it was basically this author identifying this trend that all, like, basically they went one by one through all the Best Picture nominees and talked about, like, look, this theme has to be literal. Like they can't help themselves. Like it was like over and over again, showing again and again how these movies were not satisfied leaving something as subtext or metaphorical, but actually had to literalize everything that it was trying to say. And I did think of that while I was watching this movie, because I'm like, well, there's literally they were talking about the emotional, not literal void, and now there is a literal void. And I'm like, is that is that a problem or is that reductive? Is that I was skeptical while I was watching it. But in a lot of ways, kind of inspired by what you were just saying, to learn the lesson, maybe we need to have it like in a world where people want you to stuff it down, making it something literal and out in the open like that, maybe is the only way to kind of make any progress at this point. Right? Like, so the literalism might not actually be bad. It might be the only way to kind of get at the issue in any productive way. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yes. And again, thinking about our professor hat, there have been some startling articles lately where people are talking about like what the modern college student looks like. And that comes to mind. I mean, does not insult the intelligence of my students. They have the capability for this. But if things go much beyond the surface level, we're not accustomed or trained to find those themes in the ways we once were. And the we there is society as we are. I think you're right. This is not the worst offender on that. I mean, actually, Captain America was a lot worse than this, where they were like, now we are approaching the secret base to discover who President Thunderbolt's, secret source is. And this doesn't do that level at all. I think it stays with that. But it is, it really hits you on the head with it in all regards. But actually, that's a good transition over to rhetorical situation. And I want to throw a thesis at you about this movie and others.
All right. I like it. So, the rhetorical situation, a segment in which we look at a film through the lens of our academic experience. So all four of our regular co-hosts are writing professors. If you haven't figured that out by now by listening to me and Greg, I don't know. So maybe you need something literal to show you that. So we like to have this section of the episode dedicated to making connections to our experience as scholars and teachers. Greg, what do you got?
So Jen in our outline had raised, I think, the same thing that's been on the last like 5 Marvel outlines, which is the MCU of it all. Because if we're talking about context, it's hard not to think of this new film in the context of from our opening comments we've been thinking about in the context of this stream of films. So I wanted to offer a thesis of what I think is happening in the MCU. And my general read on the MCU as a thing is that there were kind of diehards at the beginning, like Jen and I. We went to an early screening of Iron Man. We were there first, so on, take that. And then over time, that audience built and built and built and built. And then the pandemic happens, and suddenly everybody's like, I'm in the house for 6 months. I'm going to finally watch all 25 Marvel movies at the time. And we got this huge influx of fans that were suddenly like, oh my God, Infinity War, Endgame, these are the best films I've ever seen. And then since that moment, the wobble period, I think that fan base has been going to the movies and being like, why? Like, how does this connect? What do we do? I just watched WandaVision. Why is Scarlet Witch different over here? What's going on? And they've been feeling very dissatisfied. But I would offer the following thesis that since Endgame forward, Marvel films have been getting closer in tone and character to Marvel comics. And I would say that this one is a beautiful example of that, because this to me feels like a really good trade paperback, right? The villain's powers here, the shadow world, right from the Marvel logo, it's like, yes, this would look incredible on the comic book page. I've seen comics that do this, that have the color drain out and have shadows take over. And I would argue that everything we just talked about is a pure example of that. Comic books don't go deep. They don't have nuance, right? There's no graphic novel version of The Brutalist. You can't have that kind of ambiguity or that unsettled kind of questions at the end. You need something very direct and obvious. And the layering of that we've been talking about of theme and villain and character journey all onto like one clear arc feels very comic booky to me. So 1, do you accept the thesis or not that we're getting closer to comic books? And 2, do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing for the MCU as a project?
So I hadn't necessarily thought about this before you said it, but now listening to you talk about it, I would probably agree. But maybe if I were to come up with this idea on my own, I don't know if it would be for the same reasons that you said. It would be more for the kind of citational nature of comics and how, in those really, really OG Marvel comics, there would be this like little yellow box that would pop up that would be like, oh, in case you don't know what's happening, go see this issue of like Thor from 2 months ago, or you know what I mean? Like it would kind of have little footnotes to catch people up, but wouldn't necessarily bring the story to a halt to kind of explain what was going on, or what this was in response to, or like what other stories were connected. And I think people who don't like that feeling when they're reading a comic book interpret that as hastiness, like whatever, like we'll just go with it, right? Like there's a story happening, it's weird, like let's just go with it, right? And then if you want to know more about these characters and what they've done before, go read these other things. But there is an expectation when you're reading a comic book that you're like just kind of like dipping in and maybe dipping out. And I think if people don't like that, they're like, this is too rushed, like this doesn't make any sense. And those are the people who I think are critical of some of the newer Marvel movies, being like, you need to know too much about the other stuff to understand this. Like, and I think there is a part of it that is the fault of the storytelling of the movies, where it's like, because I think sometimes it's like, this movie is a good example of it elegantly doing that, right? And being like, we're going to give you enough information so you are emotionally invested in what's happening in this movie, but if you want to go crazy and like, we reference all these other things, you can go watch all the other stuff, right? But I think, and when it's not working well, it's more like, oh, we're using these other stories as a crutch, kind of, and there's no story here, but we're like just pointing at all these other stories, and that should be enough somehow, which is different. That's different than what a comic book does. So I do think that we are kind of trending more towards, just to survive in this franchise, to have to be more like comic books. And I think post Endgame, people not having a clear through line, because I think up until Endgame, it was closer to serialized storytelling in television than it was to comic books. And I think now, because we're diverging into little pockets of like, oh, Shang-Chi might reference a bunch of things that we never go back to, right? As we were talking about earlier. I think that's closer to comic book storytelling. So that's a really long way of saying, yes, I accept this thesis. Is it good or bad? I think it's bad if people are still hanging on to the expectations of the Infinity Saga.
A question of audience and audience expectations. How apt for rhetorical situation. Yeah, I like that a lot. And you made me think about, like, one of the things that's true then, if that's the case, is that Marvel does not expect you to read every comic that comes out. Right. And I think you're right that is starting to feel like a betrayal to some people. So stipulating that I know the two people on this call really liked She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, right? Like, people who saw Daredevil appear in that, and it's like, oh, good, a hint at what Daredevil's going to be. It's like, no. You should just see that as that character, Matt Murdock, existed in Jennifer Walters' universe. Yeah. Walters' universe for a few wonderful hours, and then disappeared again from that. And Wong passed through, and so on. But I think where it can help people is, I still hear the complaint like, oh, so New York is turning to shadow and Captain Marvel doesn't show up? Like, where's the Hulk? Where's this person? And I think comics never have that problem. You just assume, even though so many are based in New York, Spider-Man can fight a villain and nobody expects Daredevil to show up or Ms. Marvel to pop over from Jersey City. But if they do, you're stoked, right? If you find that moment where they overlap, it feels really good. And I think we did talk about Shang-Chi before. Shang-Chi's a perfect example. It's like, you can just go read a Shang-Chi comic and not worry that much about it. And I think you're more sensitive to this piece than I was, and I'm not dismissing those feelings. But to me, that helps me understand the huge disparity between WandaVision and Doctor Strange 2. That's what happens with a comic character is, oh, Wanda was the center of this story in one trade, but then we needed her in this other one, and it's a different creator and it's a different story, and she can play that role. I think you're right that if you then think of this as the beautiful epiphany Wanda had just to throw it all away and become this evil, wretched person and then seemingly die, That's terrible, right? That doesn't. I mean, that's a horrible series finale for that show. To steal your metaphor, so maybe we just need to view it as And if they need her again, they'll pop her back out, and they'll give. I think they have to give her a lot of money to come back at this point, but hopefully they do at some point.
Not to go back to the Shang-Chi again, but like there's a difference between like we tell like the first Shang-Chi movie, let's pretend that's like you said, like a trade paperback. And then Shang-Chi shows up in Avengers Doomsday. If you've seen Shang-Chi, then you're like, hey, my guy, right? He's here, right? But if you haven't, that should be okay, right? Like that's what you're saying. And then, but then the other flip side of it, that situation's different than Shang-Chi's. It's his sister, right? Shang-Chi's sister. Like we could get a whole other trade paperback about her just like rebuilding their father's empire and taking like basically the stinger from Shang-Chi, right? That could be a whole other spin-off series that then doesn't loop back to Avengers Doomsday. You know what I mean? Like, and that's, again, this is a long-winded way of just agreeing with you, I think. But, like I think characters can go wander off in their own stories, but then still rejoin the kind of stream and not be salmon swimming upstream. I don't know. I'm mixing my metaphors.
Well, and we were noting this like in the beginning of Avengers Ultron, like I think Sam Wilson is there explaining they've done a few things. Rhodey is there explaining he like threw a tank. And it's like, cool, he's been off having adventures and we didn't really care that we didn't see those adventures. And somewhere along the line that flipped. Now, the real test of this thesis is good comic readers know crossover events suck. So we're never going to reach this thesis unless we stop putting so much weight, because everything I just said is out the window. I think Doomsday has all this exciting potential to get all these characters together and to see what we can do. Whereas really, usually what a crossover event means is, I was really enjoying this hero's story. Now the whole universe changed. Very much more the relationship between Captain America Winter Soldier and the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show. Like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was telling a good story, and then, oops, S.H.I.E.L.D. is now evil. Figure it out, writers. It became a mess. So I think we got to wait and see. But I think they still want Doomsday to feel like the most important event that will advance all these plots. And 2 years from now, or is that next year? 2 years.
Oh, that can't be next year.
2026 can't be right if they're shooting now.
To the Google machine.
2026.
Yeah.
Oof.
So it's this time next year. That seems nuts.
That's super nuts.
So here's my Doomsday commentary as a follow-up to this conversation. I think people need to manage their expectations about, because I think my worry is that people are like, we're back, right?
Yeah.
Because they're like, this is that Endgame feeling, like this is the Infinity Saga's feeling, like we're finally, things are connecting. Fantastic Four is over here, New Avengers are over here. Sam Wilson suing New Avengers over there, right? Like it's starting to congeal in a way that's getting people very excited, I think. But if you think about how this is the multiverse saga, how it should be different just by the very nature of it being a multiverse story. This goes to your crossover comment, of everything's going to reset by the end of it, probably. And people need to be prepared that it's not going to feel the same as Endgame of we've been telling this one story slowly over time with this one set of characters. And now I feel such a sense of closure and completion. With a multiverse story, it's just going to be pure chaos, right? And that's going to be the fun and playfulness of it. And I think that's, if we think about Thunderbolts as a microcosm of that potential, I said it was a very focused and kind of singular movie, but it's also a team up movie in the sense that we have these random characters from different things, right? Like Yelena and Alexei are from the Black Widow movie. John Walker is from the Falcon and Winter Soldier Disney Plus show. Ghost from Ant-Man 2, which I totally forgot about. So there's all these random ragtag threads that are being pulled together to create this one knot that is Thunderbolts, right? And I think the reason that we're enjoying that, I think people need to remember, is because it is playful and it's new combinations of things. It's Alexei and Bucky in the truck being like, which serum did you get? Right. I got the off-brand Russian one. Right. Like, you know what I mean? That's the thing that we should hold on to, is like, that's what we should want from Avengers Doomsday. We shouldn't want the like neat and tidy closure that we got in Endgame.
It should feel a little more like Infinity War. Absolutely. My comment moments ago about how crossover events suck, that was actually based on my own anticipation and then horrible disappointment in Secret Wars, which is the second now Marvel Avengers movie, the follow-up to Doomsday. And, how close they'll adapt that. There's actually, this was my brief Google, there's actually 2 Secret Wars, and I had read the most recent one. And that was like, I was just getting into comics, and it's like, oh, like, let's see what this is all about. And I was like, this makes no flipping sense. So it was really like that same thing. So I think you're right that multiverse stories are much messier, and they have the precedent of Infinity War and Endgame. It's going to be big and messy. And the Russo brothers have not had a great track record since those movies came out. I see you, Electric State. I very much see you, Electric State. Previous long take review episode. For those who might have missed it.
I'd say check it out, but we just trashed the movie, so I don't know if you don't want to.
I think the very smart people at Marvel can make something good, but I think the less you expect going into it, and that is Thunderbolts is the model of that. So many people were like, I wasn't expecting much, and it surprised me. Go in that way from now on.
Yeah.
I think we skipped over Fantastic Four. It'll be really interesting to see how that movie does, because I think that's one that they're hoping reawakens a lot of these other fans and gives them an on-ramp into this more so than Thunderbolts. But we'll see.
How did you feel about the second post-credit scene being so heavily reliant on that Fantastic Four reference?
I thought it was silly the way it was structured, because there was, the trailer showed that rocket clearly, and they played the trailer before Thunderbolts. And so then when the rocket is like slowly turning, it's like, what's the logo it will reveal? It's like, guys, we know.
No, we recognize it. Yeah.
Yeah, we know this. We've all watched this trailer many, many times. I also, Henry, my son, was asking, like, what's the scene going to be? And I was like, it's going to be X-Men or Fantastic Four. And then we're sitting there watching. I see the beloved Diane Warren's name. Nothing's going to stop us now. And then what song is credited directly next to that? But Michael Giacchino's theme to Fantastic Four, First Steps. So I was like, it's going to be Fantastic Four, buddy. You can tell because it says right there that they are going to play that theme song.
Stop being so observant, Dad.
I know. He's like, why do you tell me these things, Dad? It was fun. I actually think the Fantastic Four reveal was the least fun part of that scene. I liked the Avengers with a Z. I liked Bob just reading a book in the corner. I liked the hint about the conflict with Sam Wilson and that Bucky and Sam are fighting. All of that was much more intriguing to me than Fantastic Four is arriving in their rocket. Also, it kind of spoils Fantastic Four, right? Like whatever happens in that movie has to end with them getting in a rocket to coming, and that is part of Secret Wars and so on. But we'll see.
Here's my counterpoint to that.
Okay,
is it was actually quite nice to have a stinger that was about a movie that we know for a fact is coming out.
That's true. I'll take that.
I'm thinking of Harry Styles at the end of
Thanos' brother.
Whatever happened to that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so,
or Jon Snow getting the sword and talking to Blade. Both the Eternals post-credit scenes seem to never come to fruition.
It's never happening, is it?
There's your Dark Avengers. Come on, it'd be so easy. But
right, yeah.
We gotta get a Blade movie first.
So in that way, it was nice to feel like, oh, that's the next movie, right? Like as opposed to like, oh, what could that be? Like that is that a movie that's coming out sometime? Like what are we going? What are we doing? Where are we going? And so that was the one good thing about it, where it's like, and honestly, like I think the average MCU viewer wants to feel rewarded for what they've watched, right? That's really all that people want at the end of the day. And I think these stingers gave them that, right? Because they're like, oh, did you sit through Brave New World? Turns out, like, Sam Wilson is like still talking to Bucky, and now they're arguing about who the Avengers are, because like, and you really only appreciate that, really, I think, if you remember from Brave New World that Sam Wilson is kind of ordained to start the Avengers again. You know what I mean? Like that. So he like
by a guy who's in prison now. So I think
Okay.
that was a little more of a question mark. But yes,
Sure.
I agreed that he was charged with starting it.
Right. But the movie was introducing that idea, right? Like of like,
Yeah.
oh, he could do that, right?
And shout out to the one shot of the Washington Monument, I think in the first 10 minutes of this movie, that shows it's broken. Like they remembered that
right.
Red
Yeah.
Hulk kind of took a swipe at the Washington Monument, so they have some scaffolding up on it. It made me laugh. That yes, those events did happen. They weren't just a cherry tree infused dream.
So what do you think? Because we haven't talked about Valentina,
the
great Julia Louis-Dreyfus, that much. What do you think her future is with like on the path to Doomsday?
I liked her a lot more here. She belonged in this movie. She did not belong in Wakanda Forever. That's the worst part of that movie, is like the half hour where we unpack that she was once married to Martin Freeman. I like where this. I think this movie made up a lot of her backstory, that she's done a huge amount of work to do this experimenting and so on. But I really like this idea of kind of a schemer who is just trying to build her own Avengers. And in the end, she gets hoisted on her own petard, right? She gets that team of Avengers, but oops, they control her instead of her getting to control them, because they know all her secrets and they can do exactly what they want. So I like that. I think it's a good thing if she continues to be around. I have heard from probably just that one podcast we both listen to, people point out Julia Louis-Dreyfus does just kind of, you assume she's being Veep in this, Selena Myers, and I do think she doesn't quite have the kind of dark seriousness. When we get her backstory, it's very dark, but I kind of, she's been on
You're
TV.
taking Sean Fennessy's side on this, aren't you?
I kind of am, because I see Julia Louis-Dreyfus and I think she's hilarious, and I loved the last two movies she was in. I understand. I'm forgetting their names. You Hurt My Feelings.
Antonio's crying right now.
Oh, he is. You Hurt My Feelings. Well, and then there was the one Antonio recommended that I didn't actually like as much. But then
Tuesday?
The one with Tuesday. Is that the one with the bird?
Yes.
Yeah. And but then the classic one she did with the guy from The Sopranos, whose son is in movies now.
Enough Said?
Yes, that was good too.
Wow, I'm just pulling all these movie titles out.
She is very talented. It's just, especially because I think Veep was so set in this same world in so many ways, it just doesn't, it rings a little hollow.
I don't know. Again, to push back on this, I don't like the Julia Louis-Dreyfus as a TV actress take. That was rude. Like I feel like someone else on the episode said it was rude. I agree with them. I really like that she's really stepped into the Nick Fury role of or she's poised now to be, I think, because like I think she always had that potential, and obviously she's the antagonist in this movie more so than poor Sentry, even because she's like, the puppet master kind of. But I think by the end, now that they've kind of got her in this tight spot where she has to just roll with it and be like, yes, I planned this as the new Avengers from the start. I wasn't trying to kill these people at all. Right. And I think that now she is in that position of, if she could, if they wanted to, be the new sort of like manager of them in a real way, but in a way that they never quite trust her, right? Because I think that was always the intriguing thing about Nick Fury, was that because, like, I guess you always assume that he was at his core good, but the Avengers never knew how much to actually trust him or how much he was keeping from them and all that sort of stuff. So I kind of like the fact that she's sort of stepped into that role potentially, and it could be really fun in the future. And I feel like there's no reason they put that flashback to her childhood in there if we don't then continue to learn more about her and understand her better. Like, I was actually a little dissatisfied where I was like, wait, like, we're not gonna go back to that. We're not gonna, no one's gonna say anything about that. Okay. Like, but I think it gives us just enough tease that it's like, oh, she's going to be around for a while probably, and we're just going to keep getting to know her, and maybe one day we'll feel about her the way that we feel about Bucky, you know?
I'm trying to think where she's shown up already. She showed up in Falcon and Winter Soldier. She showed up in the post-credit scene of Black Widow, kind of establishing. So all of those, she's recruiting these people. Did she... So Yelena showed up in Hawkeye. Who sent her there? Do we know that? Would that have been a Valentina directive?
At the end of Black Widow, her assignment is Clint Barton. So I think that's how she ends up in Hawkeye, right?
Yes, she's hunting Clint. Yes. Right. Yes, because that's who killed... It's not an assignment, it's who killed Scarlett Johansson.
Well, no, but they're one and the same, right? Because that's Valentina's whole shtick is like, oh, I'm going to leverage your pain so that you doing the thing I want is also you doing the thing you want.
Yeah.
It's very crafty.
So whatever's going on with the Young Avengers, we could get Valentina crossing into that conceivably, but it'll be interesting to see because it feels like she doesn't have a place in Doomsday. We'll have to see.
Sorry, I just keep imagining her with Kamala Khan. I feel like their energies are just so like they would clash.
I mean, whether it's Young Avengers or West Coast Avengers, because we know Kamala's on the West Coast, I won't let that go. I just want that. Like, I really love those actors. Like, I mean, coming out of Sinners, how do you not want to see more Haley Steinfeld and then the actress? I'm blanking on her name, but Kamala Khan is awesome, and maybe get Ant-Man's daughter in there, Cassie Lang. Like, there's good potential there. But all right,
sure,
we're speculating too much.
Greg, I'm glad that we are now being rewarded for staying loyal and sticking around and never giving up. And my last comment, actually, sorry to backtrack for 2 seconds because I just remembered that I wanted to say this. Valentina is the 6th Thunderbolt. She has the same potential redemption arc. That's why we see her shame room.
I like that. I like that theory. And she just never got a hug yet. Nobody's
right. She just needs the hug still. We'll get there.
Presumably Martin Freeman at one point, but we don't know. Maybe it was a hugless marriage.
Don't make that a Disney Plus show, please. I don't need to see their version of what's the Oscar Isaac and Jessica Chastain show?
Marriage.
Scenes from a Marriage?
Scenes from a Marriage? I don't know. I'm not sure.
Something of it. I feel like there are more words than just marriage. But anyway, we don't need that. No one needs that. All right, Greg, I am so glad that we got to review this, even though I'm operating on very little sleep.
And the first week it was out. Take that.
There you go.
Not a month later. First week. Thanks, Jen.
I'm back.
It was a
Marvel's
pleasure.
Back. Yeah, Marvel's
it was
back.
a pleasure. So if people are interested in finding me more places, you should check out that I'm on Rebel Base Card right now, reviewing season 2 of Andor once a week as a whole Star Wars movie. It's nuts. We recently had a guest on. His name is, I'm reading here, P.T. McNiff, who people might be familiar with. So if you missed PT this episode, come find him on Rebel Base Card talking about episodes 4, 5, and 6 of the second season of Andor. You can find me on Letterboxd and Instagram at IonCanon, EYEONCANON. Come see a whole bunch of Star Wars nonsense that I've been up to lately. And you can follow the show, as we said, on Instagram and Letterboxd. It's LTR Pod. You can look up the hashtag LTR Pod and see how many movies we all watch and see how we fight about which movies are better than the other movies. Jen, where can people find you and the good work you are doing for Marvel and Star Wars content?
First of all, I want to vouch for the episode of Rebel Base Card that PT is on with you. I just finished listening to that yesterday, and it was my perfect end to May the 4th. And it's a really fun episode. PT is PTing. He's like, let me sneak in 5 more questions that we do not have time to answer. So yeah, if you enjoy his Columbo moments on the show, he's delivering on that other show as well. You can find me on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at Sopchockchai, SOPCHOCKCHAI, and you can also find me on Letterboxd at Qui-Gon Jinn. On your left. I feel like they do say that again in this movie, don't they?
And we can build this dream forever, standing on whatever. Something's gonna stop us now.
Thanks for listening. You can follow The Long Take Review on Substack at thelongtake.substack.com. Subscribe for free, and you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. You'll also receive written reviews of new films with Oscar buzz, as well as any new installments of prop franchises like Star Wars and Marvel.